At this point, I kind of have to go into that theory I mentioned about the twin souls earlier, and specifically Fen'Harel / Solas, and because it's very important to everything I say next. So there are a lot of great explanations out there, specifically the one that Mardar on Bioware forum wrote. Great stuff in there. I would totally reference it for something a little more thorough. Dirthamin and Falon'Din. They're called twins in shadow. Falon'Din as Dirthamin's shadow and Dirthamin as Falon'Din's reflection. What I have to say about that is, come on, okay. Alright, yeah, we're going to place with this. The next quote is here. This is, of course, from a keeper or something in a codex. It says, "The little we understand implies their bond was not romantic. Beyond even the strongest friendship, the legends of Dirthamin and Falon'Din may have been an allegory for complex elven relationships we lack context to comprehend, such as being the same or existing within each other or something super close that if they would have a physical form, it would be one." Okay, 1. Falon'Din is not talked of well when you're in the Temple of Mythal and you see his mosaic. If you click on it and talk about it, you mention that people will pray to him before a hunt, and then Morrigan talks about him. But Solas has some very negative tales to spin.
I do not believe they sing songs about Falon'Din's vanity. It is said Falon'Din's appetite for adulation was so great, he began wars to amass more worshippers. The blood of those who wouldn't bow low filled lakes as wide as oceans.
And that's just when I throw up a red flag that says, Solas lies. He has lied about a lot, so I don't know. Take this all with a grain of salt.
Mythal rallied the gods once the shadow of Falon'Din's hunger stretched across her own people. It was almost too late. Falon'Din only surrendered when his brethren bloodied him in his own temple.
I'm surprised they let such a monster live.
One does not lightly kill a god, Inquisitor, even in legend. Most tales paint Falon'Din's stubbornness second only to his self-regard.
The entire story that Solas tells is super suspect. Alright, so what's said here is Falon'Din amassed a lot of followers and tried or did gather among Mythal's own people. So the gods, or people really close to her, but you say the gods. The gods were up in arms. Pew pew. Falon'Din surrenders once people akin to, or someone akin to brothers, betrays him in his own temple. Got it. It's hard for me to explain this, because he could have been being sarcastic. In fact, he does say it with a little sarcasm, and even that Bioware user Mardar basically said that he was probably judging himself for his past actions. Maybe people saw that what he was actually doing, they interpreted it as him trying to amass followers, but actually he was trying to fight something, which would kind of make sense. I can't understand why Falon'Din would want the worshippers, but I don't think I understand why anyone would, so maybe I can't comment on that. Regardless of Solas' comments on him, Falon'Din's function was to guide you into the long sleep, death, whatever, through the veil. People would pray to him on their deathbeds or before a feat to wish them luck, to get blessings for a journey. But we get to Dirthamin. Dirthamin was the god of knowledge, keeper of secrets. You can visit Dirthamin's temple in Inquisition, actually. Codex. Dirthamin gave to the elves the gift of knowledge and taught them loyalty and faith in family. So, these are not bad things here. These are very good things. I think Dirth in Elven means to seek knowledge, learn, teach. So that makes sense. This is not inherently a bad role to have, and there's nothing terrible about him until a minute. And if you consider it terrible, that's on you. There's a story that you find in a codex in the Temple of Mythal, and it talks about Dirthamin committing a crime. Basically, he takes wings, and the winged form is reserved for the gods, the much higher gods, not Dirthamin, so he overstepped his bounds. Dirthamin defends himself and says that Gillenon urged him to take the form. You could say that he took the form of a dragon and she helped him, or you could say that she gave him wings with a wolf because, yeah, he was actually represented by a raven, which will come later on, you'll understand that. A raven, a bear, and a wolf. There are always two wolves that represent Dirthamon and his brother Falon'Din, his twin soul, if you want to put it that way. But in this scenario, I'm picturing a wolf flying because that seems fun. Either way, it was a crime and you were not allowed to do that. So Gillenon, the Hollow Queen, somehow influenced him, so he says. She's like, go ahead, do it. It'll be fine. We don't know what happened specifically, but we do know that he begged Mythal to judge him instead of Elgranon. But she said, no, I'm not going to do that, leave it to daddy. And so Daddy judged him, and we imagine that didn't go well. So I think this is relevant, particularly to a story that from the time I read it in the Codex, it's from Origins, I think. When I read it, I instantly was like, Okay, so there's a story about Dirthaman and Falon'Din. In a long time ago, a super ass long time ago, they were playing and, frolicking like little elves do, and they were innocent. And this was a time before sorrows, before they knew what sorrow was. This was a time of innocence, okay? So here's Dirthaman and Falon'Din, and they're playing, and they come across a little sick deer, and she's under a tree, and she's all, and they're like, little deer, come play with us. And the little deer says, I can't play with you. I'm very sick and dying. And they're like, what? What? We don't know sorrow, huh? What's going on here? And so Falon'Din says, oh, okay, I'll help you. And he carries her beyond the veil. Now Dirthaman stays behind, and he tries to follow his brother, but he can't. He can't go beyond the veil. And so he wanders, and he's lost, and he's just like, oh, he's a puppy. He's never been separated from his brother before, and he feels completely alone. Bum, bum, bum. He's all puppy-faced. And then all of a sudden, these ravens appear. These two ravens, Fear and Deceit, try to convince him that his brother has abandoned him. He doesn't love him anymore. He won't come back for him, and that soon he will fade. But Dirthaman, who's very strong of will, he says, no, I am not lost. My brother loves me. He wouldn't do that, basically. And the ravens somehow are dominated by him. He somehow won against them, and they are now in servitude to Dirthaman. And so they carry him through beyond the veil to his brother, and they meet again. He finds his twin soul, Falon'Din. The deer is light on her feet. The spirit is released from her body. They rejoice. They are like, yeah, we're gonna play, and they have milkshakes, right? Okay. And so Falon'Din goes, from now on, I will do this. I will carry all the dead to the beyond. Whee! And Dirthaman stays with him because twin souls. There's a lot of depictions of Dirthaman and Falon'Din. Falon'Din is portrayed as like a warrior, and he's like in the fighting stance. And then Dirthaman is portrayed like, just like very stern and standing up with a strong buttock. That's all I can say. It's weird. Yeah, so he's portrayed as like obedience and order, and, chaos is Falon'Din. I see this story as the telling of really a terrible thing that was committed, which was that this was not supposed to happen. Falon'Din was not supposed to do what he had done, and Dirthaman was not supposed to be in cahoots with the ravens, who were Fear and Deceit, who I believe were the Forgotten Ones. It makes sense. But he became in cahoots with him, and he let him into his heart, and he knew Fear and Deceit now. I mean, he might have, said, oh, screw you, but he totally gave into it. Dirthaman and Falon'Din, two sides of the same coin. Obedience and disobedience, law and liberty, much like the Hierophant, suddenly altering the natural order. I think of it as their personality. All of us have the potential to choose chaos or choose order, but if someone was perfectly capable of balancing things, if it was their actual purpose in life, they were created to do this, but then along the way, their purpose changed. If Falon'Din and Dirthaman were not their names, but their jobs, their creation was very interesting and unique. Maybe to exist in the Fade, he had a spiritual self and an earthly self, thus Dirthaman and Falon'Din. Falon'Din being the spiritual, Dirthaman being the earthly. He couldn't naturally follow him, and he wasn't supposed to. And when they separated, his physical self learned what it is to be afraid and vulnerable, because apparently it had all been sunshine before. So metaphorical wings, metaphorical ravens, or maybe actual ravens. His new companions were Fear and Deceit, and that is so not good. So if we exclude Fen'Harel from the Forgotten Ones, because he is often put there, they were less than cheery. And pronunciation aside, Durnathal, Gelderon, and Anaris. Gelderon was mentioned in Jaws of Hakken. You open this thing with shards, and you can read about all of Gelderon. There is totally a long codex, and basically she's like, fuck you, Pantheon. Fuck you. Fuck you. That's seriously what she says. I'm not being crass here, people, and I just said crass. She said, let Andrel's bow crack. Yeah, she needs to calm down. But she also says their pride will consume them, and I, forgotten, will claim power all my own, apart from them until I strike in mastery. I don't know why I went weird there. I'm from Kentucky now. But yeah, she's like totally, or he or she. I don't know if it's a he or she. So yeah, off the rails, crazy. There's another story about Fen'Harel being fought over because he commits a boo-boo against Andrel. He like hunts, he as a wolf, he kills one of her, Hala, and she's like, oh, fuck you have to live in my servitude now. You're my bed slave, which is weird. I mean, I read that as bed slave. I don't know if there's another way to read it. It's not particularly interesting. Aneris comes in because she comes in and she's like, oh no, I need him. He's mine now. And they like fight over him, and Fen'Harel tricks them both into entering each other, and they have to go into a slumber, which again attributes to the fact that, you know, slumbering is when you die or something, or you're gravely wounded and you have to slumber for the elves. Anyway, so whatever, they try to make him a sex slave, and he was like, hell no, and he tricked them and went out because he's a trickster. The Forgotten Ones, and Eris included, they represented disease, terror, spite, malevolence, fear, and dread. So, ravens, yeah. Sounds like the ravens. It really does. Those ravens from that tale. I propose Dirthaman fucked up big time when he messed with the ravens. I don't think they were servants at all. I think they were totally preying on him, and he fell susceptible. Hell, taking those with you from one world to another seems like the worst idea ever. I'd just be like, screw you guys. Remember Morrigan when she's like, begone, spirit, I will not play your games in Origin? Yeah, when you're in the Fade. And then I have to add something else that goes along with the Norse stuff. Patrick Weeks recently had a bunch of tweets when he was talking about creatures, and he was talking about how he researches them and he wants to make sure that he's not using a creature that would be seen like in a sensitive light, like if they worshipped a creature, if it wasn't considered a monster. He didn't want to depict it as a monster. He didn't want to offend everybody. So that tells you one thing, and things we probably already knew, but I'm gonna state it again. They take inspiration, so that goes hand in hand with some other stuff. Odin's horse, Sleipnir, comes into play here because there is a Hala with wings and 6 legs. He is in 2 places. You can find a mural of him. First, in Mythal's temple, and then also in this other elven temple that I can't remember specifically which, but I believe it's the one that once you have the Veil Fire, you unlock it. At first I thought it was Dirthaman's temple, but I actually do not remember. But it's an elven temple, okay? And there's a bunch that you can unlock, and it's one of those, not specific, but it's at least in 2 locations, if not a 3rd location, because I've heard other stuff. So there's a lot of Odin references here. Odin's horse was Sleipnir. So yeah, you can't get away from it. But then we have to go back to the tarot. I've gone off the wagon here, so sorry, but I have more to say. In the order, the cards represent his past, in which he was completely alone, literally, or just in terms of being his kind. He had Fade friends, but he was essentially a self-contained man in his struggles, pain. He's really alone. He's a bridge between worlds, between gods and people, between chaos and peace, freedom and chains. It's really complicated, his position. And finally, he is change, a terrible necessity that must occur. He is the one who watches it happen, sees it coming, if not ensures it does. He's Snape doing what he must for all his reasons, good or bad, and poor Dumbledore. Actually, he was silent when he died. But anyway, the scary part of these cards is that if Dumbledore is you, yeah. Now I have to touch on something else entirely. So, the civil war amongst the elves. Murals depict a sickness, and you can see this in a lot of elven sites. It shows a large group generally, at least 5 or 6, I think 5, but whatever, 6, yeah, 6. And there's a yellow orb over them. They're very zombie-like, their heads are down, and it looks like their brains and chests are etched out, like they hadn't been painted. And you can think that, okay, that's an artistic choice, they took their brains out, and it's like empty space. But I propose that they were very sick or had some sort of magical influence over them they couldn't fight. I think they were desperate. I think the Civil War itself, I won't touch too much on amongst the people, the elves that were not gods, but I definitely think that they were desperate. Once the gods were locked away by Fen'Harel, they must have been super desperate. So now that I've established the fact that I believe that Falon'Din and Dirthaman were twin souls, people that just had, different functions, and eventually, they became Fen'Harel when their purposes changed and they were no longer separate as the story tells. So, the Forgotten Ones, I believe, heavily influenced the Pantheon. I believe that people fell prey to it. Not only Dirthaman, possibly Falon'Din, if they were the same person, then obviously, but the others as well, specifically Mrs. Holloqueen, Gillandin. How do you say her name? Gillan. Oh my god. So let's propose for 1 minute that when Dirthaman was punished for taking on the winged form /dragon /wolfie with wings, when he was punished by Elgar'non, he was locked away. Maybe because, as they did with Fen'Harel, they saw a threat in him. Maybe. Or maybe he legitimately did be stupid and he got locked up for it. Whatever the case may be. I believe that he wasn't in a position to do anything about the situation what happened with Mythal. I believe that Elgar'non betrayed Mythal, wandered out of the way to do whatever the hell he was going to do. Some plan he had, which could have have gone hand in hand with what happened beyond the veil and Dirthaman. Maybe they corrupted it. Maybe that the elven people were losing their immortality had nothing to do with the humans, but had everything to do with a natural order that had been disrupted, which makes a lot of sense, frankly. So Mythal says, look, I don't want to go through with this plan. It's bad. I'm not into it. And maybe some other people do as well. But Mythal says, no, I won't let this happen. And she's super powerful in her form. She's whole. She's not a spark. She's herself. And so Elgranon murders her. And maybe he has help from the Forgotten Ones and his quote-unquote children. Specifically Andrel, because I don't trust that bitch. I'm a little defensive about it. But either way, I think that's what happened. So let's say that Fen'Harel / Dirthamon / Solas / Falon'Din / the Dread Wolf, they didn't know what was going on. I don't think he did. I really don't. And he finds out what happened. Or maybe he objected to it and stood by and regretted that. But I doubt it. I think he was locked up. I think he couldn't do anything about it. So he finds out. And he's like, okay, this is freaking unacceptable. No. So he constructs a plan. And because he's had a relationship with those ravens, and because he's let them in, which is stupid, but because he's had those things, and maybe he's made mistakes in his youth, because Solas says, look, I've done some awful stuff in my youth. I was a stupid young elf. We all were. But I was particularly stupid. That's what he says at one point, more or less. So he made mistakes. He's made a lot of mistakes. But he decides, okay, listen, Mythal couldn't stop them. Someday she'll be back. That's just how shit works. Gods don't die. She had a spark. Whatever. Nobody absorbed her. She's gonna come back eventually. But I have to stop them because this is really fucked up. And I personally think that perhaps they were trying to do something that would really hurt everyone. Humans, dwarves, maybe even their own people. Maybe they were already doing it. Maybe they had such a hand in the Civil War among the elves. But as far as that goes, I think the Civil War was because once Mr. Fen'Harel, Solas, whatever, locked up the Pantheon, they prayed and they were confused, and I think they were desperate and tried a lot of things, but possibly red lyrium involved. And now I just want to point out the fact that there is something on my mind here, which is that I think Solas has more knowledge of lyrium than is practical to think. When you're in the quest to find Dagna, the appropriate materials or whatever to figure out Samson's suit. If you side with the mages, that happens. So when you're on that quest, he's like, those are the tools used to safely handle lyrium. And I was like, oh, okay. He's probably seen Dagna's or somebody's around. Somebody has them. Okay, that's not suspicious. But the more I think about it, the fact that there is hardly any mention, in fact, I couldn't find any mention of elves using lyrium. And I found that odd. Not because I think they needed it. I mean, magic was as natural as breathing. But what if magic stopped being as natural as breathing? And they would look for something else, right? I mean, maybe they would even ally with the Teventers. I don't know. I think it's all very odd. You can make a lot of parallels between the fact that Dumont tricked the Teventers, apparently. Could have been an elf. They could have been like, hey, look, we need to find our gods. You seem to think your gods are our gods. I don't know. There's a lot of complicated matter in that, but ultimately it's so similar. And the idea that they would have never encountered lyrium, especially with those murals where it kind of looks like red lyrium or something. I don't know. Take it as you will, but the point is, Solas kind of doesn't make sense that he would know what those look like. All right, okay, maybe he could have been in Dagnas. All right, well, I'll concede that is totally possible, but I will leave that open because I'm not convinced. Solas, Fen'Harel, Falon'Din, I need to make up a whole name for them, tricks the Forgotten Ones, tricks the Pantheon into thinking, hey, I'm on your side, and then he locks them away, and he like goes, oh, bye-bye. And then he's weak from when he's done, or he gets injured along the way and he has to slumber. Or maybe he just decides to. But I think it's far more likely that something happened in which he had to. Because we know that after the Fen'Harel incident with Andrel and Anaris being injured, that they slumbered. And they couldn't do anything. They couldn't chase him. So I'm seeing slumber as like recovering. And because they live for so long, it takes a really freaking long time. And it wouldn't seem that long to them. 1,000-year slumber. Whatever, man. Whatever. So he takes his slumber. And while he's slumbering, the elven people, well, they freaking destroy themselves. Teventer claims that they did it, and the elves are enslaved. And here's the reason I think that people don't have information. All right, first of all, maybe, so many people were sick, killed, and maybe their memories. I mean, that's a weird reason. But what I really think happened was this, that anyone in power, wherever they went, whatever their solution was, some people think they went into the Fade. Some people think that they actually moved Arlathan, their city, into the Fade, or somewhere else, beyond a freaking Alluvian. I don't know. That would be crazy, but it's certainly somewhat possible. Either way, the people that would have been left would have been the slaves. Now, I know that slaves, and particularly servants, like, they hear and see stuff, but I don't think they would have been involved in this particular situation. So what I propose is that the people that managed to get out and became the Dalish, and the slaves still in Tevinter, maybe some of them know, I don't know, either they didn't have very much information, or like I said, they were made to forget it through things that happened, going back to that orb and the brains that look like they were taken out. Either way, the Forgotten Ones in the Pantheon are locked away, and Mythal is gone for now. Now, who's to say that he didn't try again? Who's to say that he wasn't reborn, came back as a supposed slave in Tevinter who led the elves in the uprising, and then eventually was killed after he was supporting Andraste? He was said to be Andraste's really close friend, if not lover. Ugh. So we know that they were close, and we know that he was an elf, and they certainly look similar in some depictions. I mean, he was bald. I mean, I guess it's the only correlation, except that, yeah, similar. And they certainly had similar goals. I'm not completely sold on it, but I always think back to when you do that quest with Solas, and there's that spirit, and it's so sad, and it's his friend, and she's dying because the humans were desperate, and I totally killed those humans, and they tried to bind her, and she didn't want to kill people. She didn't. She was a spirit of wisdom, and so she ended up being turned into abomination. And she dies at the end, and she says, guide me. And that's what Falon'Din did. He guided them beyond the veil. So, I mean, that's a big touch on it. But after that, you speak to Solas, and he says,
The energy of spirits returns to the Fade. If the idea giving the spirit form is strong, or if the memory has shaped other spirits, it may someday rise again.
You're saying your friend might come back?
No, not really. A spirit's natural state is peaceful semi-existence. It is rare to be able to reflect reality. Something similar may reform one day, but it might have a different personality. It would likely not remember me. It would not be the friend I knew.
And so I always think back to that just in terms like maybe not the same as the elven people because they're spirits, but spirits are supposed to be these passive creatures. They're not supposed to cause an uprising in the Fade. They're supposed to be calm and peaceful and have a good function. And then, they get corrupted, and he hates that. We know that. That's pretty evident. So is it possible that after the fall of Arlathan, that during Andraste's time, Solas came back and he acted as Shartan, and because he couldn't really die, maybe he sort of pretended to, or that part of him that was there died? I mean, you can go through this 1,000 times and come up with not much. Shartan isn't that well known, but certainly his motives would have been similar to Solas if he wanted to fix what he had done. I don't know that Andraste was a good bet, but if we were to say that Mythal, Flemeth, whatever, were Andraste, then that would totally make sense. He'd be like, hey, Mom, I can help you, and whatever, but I still wouldn't understand why she would be out for the humans and why she would be like, magic is to serve men, not to rule it. Wait. Oh my god. So I can't really explain that. But the elven people were lost, and it was bad, and Tevinter claimed that they had taken them down. So let's get back to the tarot, which was my primary motive here, and I think with this context, you can sort of understand. We have a man in solitude who is forming a bridge between the Fade and the physical world, between the gods and the people. He teaches wisdom and will shed light upon a situation. This is not stuff we don't already know. I'm just saying this is what the cards say. Now, in the Viking tarot, Hierophant is Odin with his 2 ravens, Hugin and Munin, nice names, and his 2 wolves, Jerry and Freki. They're wolves and ravens. Durr. So, correlation. A lot of Odin stuff. In their order, the cards represent his past in which he was completely alone, literally or just in terms of his kind. He had Fade friends, but essentially he's a self-contained man, and his struggles, pain, he is quite alone. He is a bridge between worlds, between gods and people, between chaos and peace, freedom and chains. It's super complicated. And finally, he is change, a terrible necessity that must occur. He is the one who watches it happen, sees it coming, if not ensures that it does. Think back to Snape and his role with Dumbledore going along. I guess Dumbledore would be Mythal. Or you. So he's doing what he must for his reasons, good or bad. And poor Dumbledore, who falls from the tower, Sad. So it's scary to think that Dumbledore's you as the Inquisitor, certainly super alarming. In combination, the Tower and the Hierophant could be Solas finding the answers within you, thanks to the mark. Out of control mark. Or it could mean it's what ought to be. He's doing away with his previous beliefs. These cards do not mesh. These two cards do not go together because one stands for order and the other for destruction. So we could say that he's going to destroy the order, but you kind of think he has already. But still, he's going to destroy more order. And maybe we're going to sit back and let him. It'll depend upon your choices. Hopefully, sort of. I also have another sort of theory thing that I hesitate to mention, but just as an afternote, and I'll try to summarize my feelings on this, regarding the elves and what happened, and Solas and his motivations. When he gave that orb to Corypheus, you wonder, okay, he was weak, why couldn't he wait? Well, there was a matter of urgency, it seems. It's hard to say what that matter is. It really is. Maybe there was a limited time period. I don't know. But we do know that if you did the mage quest, then you went forward in time, and then you reversed and went back. So that was time magic. Now, when you talk to him about this, and when he comments on it, he's like, no, I have no idea. Look, it's complicated, whatever. And I've read that when the breach was, broken into, whatever, breach was opened, there was a limited period of time and that would have been possible. And somehow it happened. So I'm thinking, what if he intended to go back in time? This might be the Doctor Who in me. And I say this a little ashamed, but not really. There are comments he makes in a romance with Solas that are really interesting because after he dumps you, Cole has a line.
But then you turned away. Why?
I had no choice.
She is barefaced, embarrassed, and she doesn't know. She thinks it's because of her.
You cannot heal this, Cole. Please, let it go.
He hurts, an old pain from before, when everything sang the same. You're real, and it means everyone could be real. It changes everything, but it can't. They sleep, masked in a mirror, hiding, hurting, and to wake them... Where did it go?
I apologize, Cole. That is not a pain you can heal.
And now, here's the thing about that. Cole says funny stuff. Interpret that as you will. I, however, like to go a little crazy here and say that when he says, if you're real, because he supposedly loves you or likes you, or has deep affection for you,
you're real, and it means everyone could be real. It changes everything, but it can't.
Meaning he could accept this world, he could try to move forward, he could, not want to go back. So I personally, combined with this, he says this world a lot. He does. And also, when he breaks up with you, if you're super pathetic about it, which I was, because, oh my god, it was sad.
Solas, don't leave me, not now. I love you.
You have a rare and marvelous spirit.
Wanker.
In another world.
Why not this one?
He basically dumps you super subtly. Like, I didn't even know she was being dumped. I was just like, and he's like, I've been distracting you. And they've been calling each other like heart and whatever and saying I love you. And he's like, sorry, I've been distracting you. Bye.
I can't. I'm sorry.
And he walks away. And then you cry a lot. Okay, no, I'm kidding. I kind of teared up because she makes a very sad face, my little elf. She's so cute. Because it's sad and you can tell that he cares for the Inquisitor deeply. So when he says in another world, I'm thinking to myself, okay, we could say that if he didn't have the mission he had to do, but what if we think for 1 second that his mission was to somehow have used the orb to go back? Either undo what he's done or stay or make sure Mythal was never killed. Something like that. I'm just saying, I know it's a bit wackadoo, I know, but those lines in themselves at least are suspicious.
You're real, and it means everyone could be real. It changes everything, but it can't.
In another world.
And we will know soon enough. But I've seriously gone on overload here. Overload. So what did I want you to learn from this video? Basically that I believe Dirthaman, Falon'Din, Solas, Fen'Harel, Dreadwolf are all the same, technically, person. Maybe at one time or another that they had separate purposes and they have existed somehow separate, but then events caused them to become one. He was punished somehow because he was kind of a fool at times. He didn't realize what was going on. Mythal was betrayed as Andraste was betrayed, as Philimith was betrayed, that he had a relationship with Mythal that was very motherly and son, and he was angry at what happened to her, and he locked them away. And the elves were sick, and they were desperate, and something was being done because they had somehow lost their immortality, if they ever had it, which I suppose they would. That the Norse mythology is seriously rampant, and that you should consider that when you're thinking of this story. Oh, and that Odin is Elgranon. Right there, just said it. Oh, and that the tarots are predicting some really bad shit to go down, so be ready. Be ready. Trespasser DLC comes out soon. If you're hearing it before then yeah. Thank you for listening to me and my really, really long explanation of this. I hope I somehow was coherent. I really do. Either way, Dragon Age is a great game, and the story is really rich, and there's a lot of influence, so there's a lot that you can just take as sort of like in the back of your head when you're playing, when you're making decisions. Just think about it. And also, I just want to mention that recently at the Future Past Present panel at PAX, one of the employees of Bioware said that Solas was to be interpreted as kind, as caring about everyone deeply. So I think that when you're thinking about him, it'd probably be best to say, yeah, he maybe had a past where he did some really bad stuff, but he's a very good person. He is kind, and even if your character had a poor relationship because he's hard to please, if you don't make all the decisions he likes, he can be a real bitch. Like on my current playthrough, he's like, I won't talk to you about me because I think you'll try to kill me later or something. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. But when you play your Templar favorable outcome, which is really hard, by the way, it's really kills your soul to do, he does not like you, okay? And you can punch him. I haven't punched him yet, but yeah. So it's just that you kind of have to be on his page, and he loves it when you ask questions. But I adore Solas. I think that he's definitely going to stick around. We know that. And maybe some bad shit will happen in Trespasser. I don't know. I hope it doesn't break my heart. Patrick Weeks, writer of Coal, Iron Bowl, and Solas. Don't do that to me. All right, so thank you for watching. I hope some of this was at least entertaining and food for thought. Food for thought. Cookie for thought. Okay, thank you for listening. Bye.